This into this morning's plenary called Making a Difference. How do we make a difference? And it really is what this work is about. So in these three areas of human trafficking, supporting elementary students, and affordable care, the Affordable Care Act, how do we make a difference? And these are just examples of some of the way work is already going on our campuses, and also some of the best and promising practices in the area, and maybe some inspiration for some of you who may not be doing work in one or more of these areas that are willing to take a deeper look because there's such relevance to what's going on today. And so I am going to invite to come from the back. Do I have to go to that door? Is it open? I need to get the folk from the back to come on out to the front. Our first panel is going to be on human trafficking. The discussion is going to be led by Mara Vanderslice from the Department of Health and Human Services. She will be joined by Ken Bedell, who is going to be the surrogate representing Adrian College today. Adrian College has been working in the human trafficking area over the last couple of years, and they were scheduled to be with us until they were invited as a student group to present at the Anti-Slavery Museum, I believe in Michigan. So they have a video presentation that they've sent to share with us today. And after that panel, they will move off, and Chad Fry will come with Messiah College and his team. And after that, Acacia Salati, who is the acting director of the Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships at the Department of Health and Human Services, will come and talk to us about the Affordable Care Act. And I will not get up in between each one unless they're just some other piece of news that has to happen. And so I hope that you will celebrate them appropriately as they come. And Mara is here, and I'm inviting her to come on up. And she was one of our leaders in this work over the past few years as she assisted Joshua Dubois at the White House managing the White House Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. She also managed the convening of the college presidents last year, and she has stayed closely aligned with this work. And we'll talk to you about what the administration is doing in this space of work on human trafficking, and be joined by Ken Bedell and maybe one other campus representative. But now, Mara, would you come on up and let's give her a warm welcome as she gets us kicked off for this morning. And this young man will be giving you a sense of your time.
Okay, great, fabulous. All right, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I have the mic on.
No, you do need to.
I do need to. Yeah,
no,
got it on. Is that good?
Yeah,
not two mics.
Just
one mic is probably good enough, right? Okay, well, good morning, everybody. Should I sit here, Ben, or just sit or stand? Okay, great. Thank you all. Is there an echo with that? Is it going to be okay? All right, good. Well, good morning. It's great to be here with everyone. I think, as you all heard, I was working in the White House when we launched the President's Interfaith Campus Challenge that we dreamt up with our colleagues from the Interfaith Youth Corps and many of you. And so we're just immensely proud to see how much this has taken off and all the great work you all have done. So it's truly a pleasure to be here with you this morning. And I hope we'll have a real conversation. As Brenda mentioned, I have been helping to lead our faith-based initiatives work across government on the issue of human trafficking, and our President's Advisory Council on Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, which, by the way, was the original group that made the recommendation to the President about launching the President's Interfaith Council, this year has worked on the issue of human trafficking. So we just released this report in the spring of last year. And this is really an issue that the President has taken up to make a priority for his administration. And you may be asking yourself the question, why? Many of our council members did when we said this was going to be the issue we worked on. But I truly believe, as the President does, that this is one of the greatest human rights atrocities of our time, as the President has called it. And I think it will become one of the great moral causes of this generation, of our lifetime, to bring to an end, as Americans have done before, to bring to an end modern-day slavery as it exists in our world. So what is human trafficking? There is estimated to be 21 to 27 million people that are trafficked every year. It's a $32 billion industry, the second largest grossing criminal industry in the world. And it faces people all over the world, men, women, girls, boys, people in impoverished countries and developing countries, and people literally right around the corner from where your campuses are, right around the corner here from Georgetown in our own country. And in all 50 states in the United States, there's been incidences tracked of human trafficking. So what is human trafficking? Basically, human trafficking is exploitation. Some people think that there has to be required movement, that trafficking means bringing people across borders. It doesn't necessarily define movement. It means that person is being exploited for their labor or for commercial sexual exploitation without benefit, for the gain of another person. So somebody could be trafficked by their uncle right downtown in Washington, D.C. If they're taking a 12-year-old girl or a 13-year-old girl and selling her for sex, she's considered a trafficking victim. It could be entire families that are born into indentured servitude in the brick kilns in India, where they are enslaved for generations because they're never able to pay off the debt that they owe to the brick owners. So children that are born into those brick kilns or those mines are just automatically in servitude to pay off their parents' debt, and they begin working as young as 5 or 6 years old, working 18 hours a day, carrying bricks or cooking them with very, very little food, very little rest. And this can be the entire life of a child that grows up in an Indian brick kiln. Or it could be children that are sold by their families in Ghana who go work on the Lake Volta, where you see young boys aged 6, 7, 8 years old who were literally sold into slavery to work on the fishing boats day in and day out by their parents, and they can be sold for as little as $50 or $60. And then these kids are forced to dive into this lake and untangle the nets with their hands in these fishing lakes. I mean, we've just seen this happening over and over. Here in the United States, we have slavery in our agricultural system. In Florida, they've documented slave labor in the tomato fields. People that were brought in, sometimes illegally, and their documents are taken and held, and they're required to work against their will. And when they protest, they're locked up, or in the case of the fields in Florida, the owners actually ran over their feet with a truck, trying to force them to continue to work without pay. We've seen young girls who are lured away by friends or someone who they think is going to be their boyfriend, who then forces them into sexual commercial exploitation. Oftentimes, they are working at trucking stops, where truckers will stop overnight, like in Toledo, Ohio, all the way across I-70 across the United States, and they're made to go up and knock on every trucker's door to try to get to a quota of how many men they can have sex with that night, or they could be beaten, or their families are threatened. So we know that this is a tremendous issue. It's a human rights travesty, and it's happening right here in our country. So what has the president done to call all of us to take action? Many of you may think, well, this is such a tremendous crime, or it's happening far away, or it's so illicit. How in the world could we, as students or teachers or faculty on our campuses, make a difference? But in fact, there are people all around this country that are standing up to fight human trafficking, and there's a number of very concrete things that all of you can do at your exactly on your campuses to raise awareness. First of all, we need to raise awareness about this problem. People have myths or ideas up in their head about what human trafficking is, or they think it's not something that happens within our borders. So first of all, we need to raise awareness about what it is. Secondly, we need to be able to identify the signs, so that if you come across somebody in your community or even on your campus, or perhaps it's a cousin or a sister or a brother or a member of the family of somebody who is a student on your campus, or groups that you're volunteering for. Maybe it's the kids you're mentoring in a school nearby. Maybe it's even the janitors or the work people that work on your campus. Is your school making sure that there is no exploited labor or trafficking within that kind of labor that comes onto your campus? We need to be able to identify the signs and then call the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And I can get out this information to everybody, but there's one centralized point where you can call into, and they've fielded 80,000 calls. They've actually uncovered more than 9,000 human trafficking victims because of calls of just average folks, just like people in this room, that see something strange and make a phone call. And then the police are able to come in and identify the traffickers, arrest them, and rescue the survivors. So we know we need to do public awareness. We need to train about how to identify victims. We need to provide greater support for survivors once they come out of a human trafficking situation. Right now, there are very few beds, very few social services for these victims, and as you can imagine, they've been through so much violence. For young girls that have sometimes been prostituted since they were 12 or 13 years old, they have severe mental health needs. Sometimes many of them have PTSD, or they have drug addiction that has been a way that the traffickers have kept them lured in. So they need wraparound services. In many of your communities, you're going to find shelters or houses for these women and men who are trying to recover from their trafficking situation that need support, that need help. Maybe they need food, maybe they need school supplies, maybe they need counselors, maybe they need tutors, so that these women and men can get into a new life for themselves. So there's all sorts of help that's needed at the local level, and probably in every one of your communities there's this kind of shelter that could use your help. So we need to provide those services for the victims. And then finally, to think about advocacy and action at the local level. We want to make sure that the police forces and your local governments are trained to recognize trafficking victims as victims, and not treat these young women who come in as being prostitute or sex trafficking victims as criminals. In many states, they're still being locked up as 13 or 14-year-old girls who've been forced into this life, and then they get thrown into juvenile detention because the police can't tell the difference between a victim and a girl who should not be considered as a criminal. So there's a lot of advocacy that needs to happen at the local level, as well as to make sure that we're funding this at the proportionate level to the scope of the crime. And right now we need to see a dramatic increase in both the federal and the state level funding, as well as making some of these laws change. So there's a number of roles that campuses can play, from raising awareness, learning how to do better victim identification, helping to support survivors in your local area, and action and advocacy that you can take to improve the laws and increase funding for this work. And if I can just conclude, I'd like to read you a quote from President Obama's speech that he gave. He gave a landmark speech on this issue at the Clinton Global Initiative almost exactly a year ago, because it's this week is the Clinton Global Initiative. And if I can find it in my book here. And the president gave a groundbreaking speech on this issue, and it's really helped to sort of formulate all of the work we've been doing inside the administration since then. And I'll just read this to you. From the president's speech almost exactly a year ago. Right now, there is a man on a boat, casting the net with his bleeding hands, knowing he deserves a better life, a life of dignity, but does not know whether anyone is paying attention. Right now, there is a woman hunched over a sewing machine, glancing behind the bars on the window, knowing if just given the chance, she might someday sell her own wares, but she does not think that anyone is paying attention. Right now, there is a young boy in a brick factory, covered in dust, hauling his heavy load under a blazing sun, thinking if he could just go to school, he might know a different future. But he does not think anyone is paying attention. Right now, there is a girl somewhere, trapped in a brothel, crying herself to sleep again, and maybe daring to imagine that someday, just maybe, she might not be treated like a piece of property, but as a human being. But she does not know if anybody is paying attention. And so our message today to them is, to the millions around the world, that we see you, we hear you, and we insist on your dignity. And we share your belief that if just given the chance, you will forge a life equal to your talents and worthy of your dreams. Our fight against human trafficking is one of the greatest human rights causes of our time, and the United States will continue to lead it in partnership with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Well, I know sometimes I come to conferences like this and I hear about something like trafficking, and just, wow, you know, what can I do? How can I make sense of that? And so we thought what we'd do in the next couple of minutes is two things. First of all, there's a sense in which it's so kind of overwhelming, and you might be thinking well, how do you even get started, and what are some kind of first steps? And so we're going to ask Tiffany Stewart, who is the Dean of Hendricks Chapel at Syracuse University, who has done the President's Interfaith and Community Service Campus Challenge, kind of like hitting everything, every topic, doing everything, not only sharing with things across the different ministries that she's responsible there at Syracuse, but cooperating with Georgetown University and with others in the region. And so we wanted her to just kind of say, well, how do you even raise this issue on a campus? How do you get started? And then I'm going to say a few words about a campus, Adrian College, that has gone on this particular topic as just full bore. This is their whole focus in terms of the President's Interfaith and Community Service Campus Challenge, and it's become, so you can kind of see the range of responses, not just response, but how do you get started and where might this even lead on your campuses? So, Tiffany?
Thank you, Ken, for that really gracious introduction, and we are really not doing everything. And the example of human trafficking is the ways in which sort of the limits of what we do at Syracuse University. So for the past 3 years, we have been doing the President's Challenge, and it's been very successful on our campus. Students have taken to us. But we said we need to focus, right? So we have to have a plan, and we created our plan, and what is your issue? And our issue was hunger. And we did it really well for the past 2 years. Human trafficking was not on our campus's radar. Let me rephrase that. We did not know that human trafficking was on our campus's radar. So as dean of the chapel, I was leading the small group of students, asking those who I could identify, those who were already involved in interfaith initiatives, what are you passionate about? They said hunger. But what happened as a result of the work that we had done over the past 2 years, a local congregation, Eastern Hills Bible Church, called me and they said, I know that Syracuse University has this campaign, I think it's called like Better Together or something about the President's Challenge. And I said, yes, it's called both of those things. That was very confusing. And I hear that you want to create change in the world, and that's what you're doing on campus. And we have an opportunity for you. We're bringing in a speaker from the International Justice Mission. I did not know about IJM before this opportunity. And they said, we'd like to share the speaker with you on your campus, and we would like to invite the Interfaith Better Together President's Challenge to be part of this. Would that be okay if we did this? And I said, sure, that would be great. Human trafficking is not our issue of focus. It's not in our plan. But plans don't always go the way you think they will, right? And so we were able to be flexible and to bring this group in. And we are at the very first stage of raising awareness at Syracuse University. That's where our campus is on the issue of human trafficking. And we did that by bringing in a speaker. And what that did for our campus is it tapped into a group of students on our campus who were passionate both about stopping human trafficking and their faith. And it brought people to the Interfaith Challenge, to the Interfaith Student Alliance that would never have come through our doors otherwise. Primarily, they came from groups like Campus Crusade for Christ, InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. These are groups that before, when we invite them to come and be part of it, said, that's really great, we're glad you're doing it, but that's interfaith engagement is not for us. And it was because we weren't tapping into the issue that they were passionate about. They were passionate about human trafficking, and we did not know. We did not know. And so what this issue has taught me at Syracuse University is the ability to really listen deeply, not just to the students who are already involved. That's great, and those students are going to do wonderful leadership programs. But there are other issues that are bubbling up that we may not hear about because those students aren't at the table yet. And human trafficking has the power and potential to bring those students in. There are campuses across the country, Georgia Tech is one of those, St. Edward's University is another in Austin, that are doing phenomenal projects that go beyond the raising awareness. And so, for me to be on the plenary kind of feels a little awkward because I think that there are other campuses that have engaged this issue in a much deeper way. But what it has done for Syracuse University, it's raised awareness, it's brought in a new constituency to the challenge and to our interfaith work, and it's pointed us in new directions. Okay, so we've raised awareness about human trafficking over there, right? International Justice Mission, they do work domestically, but the name sort of gives a false implication. And so students really wanted to talk about human trafficking over there. Now our goal is to talk about human trafficking here. What does it look like in central New York at Syracuse University on Walnut Park, which is lined with fraternities and sororities. Where are the places where we have the power not just to raise awareness, but to engage our students in identifying places of trafficking, to be able to have the power and the agency to call? We've made connections through the Advocacy Center, which is our Center for Sexual Support for Victims and Survivors of Sexual Abuse and Assault and Harassment, as well as Vera House, which is, again, is our local community organization. So it's built bridges between the university and the community, and it's helped us to go deeper. So I looked at folks like St. Edward's University and Georgia Tech. I don't know if Georgia Tech is in the house this morning, but you all are our inspiration at Syracuse University for the ways in which you're doing it. Yesterday, Sarah Perkins from Georgia Tech said, think big, act small. And that's what we did at Syracuse University. And it's a way really, I think, to grow. Grow not just the interfaith movement on your campus, but to grow awareness and advocacy on a human rights issue as large and as significant as human trafficking in the US and abroad.
Thank you. Adrian College is not here because this weekend they were in Cincinnati, Ohio at the Historians Against Slavery conference, and they were the one student group that came to tell their story about what they were doing on their campus and to share with these academics there. So I just want to quickly give you an idea of what they have done on their campus over the last few years, actually going back before they participated, before we even had the President's Challenge. They had identified human trafficking as an important issue to work that comes out of who they are. Their founder was an abolitionist. And it was out of recognition and kind of getting in touch with that story. They identified a gravesite nearby of an abolitionist that had been abandoned, and students went out and cleaned that up. They took students on trips to Harriet Beecher Stowe's house. They set up programs to understand better Frederick Douglass and to not only read his two autobiographies, but to do some kind of getting into that. Then they also moved towards integrating it into their academic programs, and so that they first had a course that had turned out 50 students showed up for it, and that they had a course on human trafficking. And now it's part of their freshman experience where they've developed a curriculum where students identify with historical figures who related to the abolitionist movement or anti-slavery movements throughout history, and they'll get into debates. They have a whole curriculum to kind of get in touch with that, and then bring that to where then students have taken the initiative of raising money. The students have worked on lobbying issues, and so that it's kind of grown out of that. I don't want to take a lot more time just kind of describing that of what I know from their reports, but they've prepared a video that just, I think, gives the emotion. We'll just close this part of the panel with that, if you can cue up the video, and then go on to the next panel.
A century ago, a band of brave souls became known as one-way missionaries. They purchased single tickets to the mission field without the return half. And instead of suitcases, they packed all of their earthly belongings into coffins. As they sailed out of port, they waved goodbye to everyone they loved and everything they knew. They knew they would never return home. A.W. Milne was one of those missionaries. He set sail for the New Hebrides in the South Pacific, knowing full well that the headhunters who lived there had martyred every missionary before him. When Milne packed his coffin, he knew there was a good chance he'd be buried in it before long. For 35 years, he lived among that.
I think it's important to realize that human trafficking is sort of like this many-headed beast. You know, it has expressions as far as child soldiers, young kids in other parts of the world primarily being forced into militia groups and violent kinds of activity. The probably best known form of this horrible stuff is sex trafficking. Sex trafficking gets a lot of attention, as is understandable, because it deals with the exploitation of women primarily, but also children, and forced into providing so-called sexual services. But what they really are being asked to do is become property and objects of abuse. Just awful. Labor trafficking is the other major form of human trafficking, and labor trafficking doesn't get quite as much press, but it needs to be acknowledged. We're talking about people being enticed and then forced into some kind of debt bondage to work in the hotel-motel industry, construction industry, restaurant industry. In fact, Dr. Dave Batstone's first experience getting to know the horrors of human trafficking was with children who were forced to work in a restaurant.
So I heard about Not For Sale from Pastor Chris freshman year, and started going to the group, and didn't really know a whole lot about what it was all about until I got to the meetings, and was kind of shocked when I heard about all the different facts about how prevalent modern day slavery really is across the globe. So we were able to get the Not For Sale books, which are from the global organization. And after reading that, you really kind of get an eye-opening about what is really going on in the world.
I got involved because I was outraged. Most people who originally get involved is because they get really upset. It's a really disturbing, sickening issue. And it evokes a lot of emotions.
And then I had the opportunity last semester to go with a couple students to the underground Not For Sale railroad, where it was basically this museum from it had 3 levels, and the first level was old time slavery, and it kind of worked the way up as you went up each level to modern day slavery, which is what our group is fighting for, anti-trafficking.
Not For Sale on our campus we're all about raising awareness about the issue of human trafficking, because it's not that known, and not a lot of people know that it's even a problem in our country. And we're also all about fundraising and coming up with funds to support causes who help fight against human trafficking.
We visited the Harriet Beecher Stowe house, and she actually was the author of Uncle Tom's Cabin, which was written in 1852, talking about and addressing the issues of slavery, and she really focused on how families are torn apart and things of that nature. So it was interesting to compare, slavery from the 1800s and to compare to modern slavery, because it does exist despite the 13th Amendment and Emancipation Proclamation.
I'm holding here the most valuable piece of property at Adrian College. And it's the most valuable piece of property, interestingly enough, because it is full of the writing of our first college president, Asa Mahan. President Mahan made a huge distinction between the inestimable, supreme value of human beings as opposed to property. So if you want to talk about inanimate objects, this is very valuable, but of course nothing compared to human beings. President Mahan used the language intrinsic worth in this book, where he talks about people having intrinsic worth, a worth of their own, an internal worth, a worth that is not calculated by whether people can be used or exploited. And this, when he was in his 60s, he came to Adrian College, started Adrian College in 1859. President Mahan taught constitutional law at Adrian College, and at the very last page of this book, he had a note on what he called the Last Amendment. It's as if the old anti-slavery warrior on the last page of his manuscript wrote, "They finally did it. They passed this amendment. They outlawed slavery. The work is done." But we know the work's not done. And we know that we owe President Mahan, and most especially all the contemporary victims, a commitment to keep working until it is done.
My name is Matt Philpott.
My name is Jessie Flake.
My name is Holly Payne.
My name is Alicia Fowler.
My name is Emily Cutler.
And I am not for sale.
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 I am not for sale.
I've asked a troop to join me this morning. We drove from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania this morning at 5:30. It was a bright and early start. In fact, one of our panelists, Molly, came down from New York. She's at the Teachers College, so she took the train down to be with you. And so I am just going to start off really briefly by introducing everyone here and then explaining a little bit about what we want to do with the panel in terms of educational partnerships and university connections. And then I'll conclude at the end. So my name is Chad Fry. I'm the director of the Agape Center for Service and Learning at Messiah College. Immediately to my right is Dr. Sybil Knight Burney. She is the superintendent of the Harrisburg School District. Beside Dr. Burney is my great colleague, who's the director of the Center for Public Humanities, Jean Corey. And beside her is Marguerite Gonzalez. Margarita is one of Jean's students in a program called the Hoveder class, which she'll introduce and talk a little bit about. Beside Margarita is Don Merck. Don is our chair of our education department and a Boyer Fellow. And sitting immediately to his right is Molly Thompson, one of his students, who is a student teacher at Downey Elementary School. Now, there weren't enough seats up here, but there's some more folks that I want to point out. And if you wouldn't mind just standing up real quick and waving. Allison French. Allison is at Pac Vista. Are you familiar with the Vista program? So you know Allison is working hard and basically living off food stamps. Right beside her is Travis Peck. Travis is the principal of Downey School. Travis will give you a little love too. And beside Travis is Mr. Raymond Bennett. Mr. Raymond Bennett is our parent-teacher liaison. Thank you, Raymond. I also have my colleague, Keith Jones-Pomeroy, who coordinates all of our student organizations who are serving regularly in the local Harrisburg area. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Sybil to frame a little bit from her perspective what this university partnership is, why it's important, and how it's impacted a school. In many ways, we were invited, and I just want to thank publicly Reverend Dr. Brenda Mitchell, Ken Bedell, his staff, Secretary Duncan, many others, and the hosts here at Georgetown. This is an absolutely fantastic place. But in this kind of work, everything is like a triple bank shot in pool, right? Folks are trying to shoot the ball into the federal government, who's trying to hit the state government, who's trying to hit the local government, who's trying to sink the shot. And when you think about aligning those things all the time, it's incredibly difficult. So we're here to talk at the local level about an inspiring partnership.
All right, thank you. And I'll get started. Again, I'm Dr. Sybil Knight Burney, and I'm the superintendent of Harrisburg School District, and I'm honored to be here and to have this opportunity to share with you today about an amazing partnership that we have. First, I need to tell you why it is so important for us to be on this journey together, because you need to know a little bit about the Harrisburg School District. We are the capital city of Pennsylvania. There are about 48,000 residents. We have in our district about 6,500 to 6,700 students. We have 87% of those students that are eligible for a free and reduced lunch, which means that we are a Title I school district. Anytime during the school year, we can have between 350 to 500 students who are homeless, so we have a very transient population. We also have about 12% of the students who are limited English proficient. Of those 12%, there are 23 countries represented with over 30 different languages. We also have a higher amount of special ed population. The state average is between 18 and 20, and ours is about 28%. We face many challenges in Harrisburg because we have also, for the past, I want to say 15 years, have been low scores on our state assessments. So many of our students, about 60%, perform basic to below basic. In addition to those kinds of statistics, we, in the last few years, have been faced with a financial crisis. So in the past 3 years, I've been interim and then appointed as superintendent. We have had to face over a $22 million deficit, which means that I have lost over a third of my teaching staff, over a half of the district administrators, and a third of the support staff. In addition to that, we have lost important programs such as pre-K, which is normal for everyone else in every other place, but it's not mandated, so it's a program that had to be cut. We've also lost very much of need, a high need, are our social workers, our school psychologists, and also our librarians. We have one district librarian for 10 schools. We have also been in jeopardy of losing athletics and band. So I'm just trying to let you see where the great need is and why this partnership is so important. Messiah, in the past few years that I have been in Harrisburg, has participated in many different kinds of community events with us. They've participated in mentoring program where they've worked with some of our boys and brought them to the college campus, African American and Latino boys in grade 5, 6, and 7. They have helped in some tutoring projects, and we worked together in the Dr. Martin Luther King Day of Service. So these have been some of the kind of projects that we had together. What Together for Tomorrow has afforded us is the opportunity to formalize our partnership and what Chad and I always talk about, take it to a different level, a higher level. That level has allowed us to focus on one of our troubled schools, which is Downey School, and we are able to mobilize all of the major resources, which can be in the form of the student-teacher internships, counselors, social worker internships. We've been able to mobilize the Green Initiative. We've been able to really pull some of the parent engagement kind of things that Messiah has to offer, take them off of their isolated campus and bring them into the city of Harrisburg to do more work with us and to provide those supplemental services and resources that our budget has allowed us to has mandated us to cut. So it's been a partnership that is, I would like to call it reciprocal, because while we are gaining, we are also sharing. I even wrote in my notes that the benefit has provided educational opportunities and possibilities for all of our stakeholders. And I'd like to call it a celebration of the experience of learning. And that's what's been happening for us. When you see our video that's going to be queued up in a second, we have a logo, Together for Tomorrow. And the tagline says, it's a Swahili proverb, correct? And it says, if you want to go fast, walk alone. If you want to go far, walk together. And that's what our partnership is doing. That's what Messiah and their commitment to service, along with the Agape Center, has done and is doing for the students and families of Harrisburg. I just hope that our involvement from the school district level will provide the students of Messiah the same kind of experience that it is for us. That experience of providing a good foundation for our students to have a higher quality of life. And isn't that what it's all about?
So if we could watch the video right now, this was done by the Downey School, and we couldn't bring them all with us, but we thought we'd try to have some other voices represented.
Hello, and welcome to Downey School. My name is Travis Peck, and I am the principal. To the right of me, you will see a community and school partnership that was created this past spring, the Together for Tomorrow initiative. To the left, you will see if you want to go fast, walk alone. To the right, you will see if you want to go far, walk together. And to the far right, you will see a tree with 7 lines, which represents the 7 habits we will be implementing this year for our future leaders. So come join me, and let's see what new exciting things we have occurring at Downey School.
This is what we used at Open House, and it is for Together for Tomorrow, which is our main initiative here at Downey to improve student achievement through a bunch of different facets, but specifically attendance, behavior, course completion, employability, and college access. And so this is just a board that highlights a lot of the things that we're doing through the Leader in Me and through the partnership between Messiah and Downey.
While the Messiah College students were here with their Into the Streets initiative, they worked hand in hand with the 3rd and 4th graders to outline, color in, and draw the 7 habits. As you look at the 7 habits that are displayed underneath the front stage, you can see the hand motions with the arrows showing what the students will be learning. This will continue throughout all their special subject areas, along with their classroom morning meetings and throughout the day.
Habit 1, be proactive. Habit 2, begin with the end in mind. Habit 3, put first things first. Habit 4, think win-win. Habit 5, seek first to understand and then to be understood. Habit 6, synergize. Habit 7, sharpen the saw. Sharpen the saw.
How do you feel the Leader in Me initiative at Downey School is helping our students?
A large part of it is that it's actually giving them ownership of the school. It's making them realize they're not just here to pick up information, it's a process of how they're learning. And that's changed their lives, where we're trying to change their motivation in their lives from external to internal.
It's giving us hope for the future. There's something great happening here at Downey School, and people want to be attached to it, because we're moving in a completely different direction in terms of schools in the city. And the overall feeling is like we're doing something. We're making changes in lives. We're change agents, and we're doing something that it's definitely needed.
You may ask yourself, how are we measuring success with Together for Tomorrow and the Leader in Me? This past September 4th, Downey School had over 150 parents attend our fall open house, compared to our previous average of 30 parents. Increased parental and community support increases student academic, behavioral, and social growth. Downey School currently has 78 out of 325 students signed up for our after-school student tutoring program. Downey School is writing a new chapter on student success and community involvement through the use of Together for Tomorrow and the Leader in Me initiative, along with our strong partnership with Messiah College.
Exciting things are happening at Downey School.
People are coming together.
Changes are coming. And we want you. And we want you.
We want you
to be a part of it.
Be a part of something good.
Be a part of something positive. President Obama's initiative
has allowed Messiah College
and Harrisburg County Elementary School
to establish a partnership.
And it's called Together for Tomorrow.
Please join us as we bring our students, our families, our teachers, our staff, and our community together for tomorrow.
Special thanks to Travis and Allison for really spearheading that. Now I'd like to ask Dr. Merck to introduce Molly and to talk a little bit about the growing professional development school that we have working with Downey.
Thanks, Chad. Doesn't that just make you want to be there at the school? I put a sign on my office door on campus, "Be back in 3 days," and I just spend my time there. This is really an exciting partnership, and I just want to share this quickly. I did my student teaching at Downey in 1978. And ever since that time, I've had this dream that somehow Messiah would partner with Downey, and it's come to fruition, and it's absolutely wonderful. And Travis mentioned in the video this notion of a professional development school, and I just want to take a minute to think about the excitement that our students at Messiah feel, and also the students at Downey and the faculty and staff at both institutions feel. Because a professional development school will allow us to ensure that all students learn, to create a culture of collaboration, which you've seen in that video, and also to focus on the results. And as a professor, education professor, I just, having our students be a part of this partnership and spending time in the school is just absolutely wonderful for them, and also for those of us who get to spend time in there with them, supervising them. I'd like Molly to share a little bit about her experience there.
Sure. I guess you could say that I caught the bug. I worked in Harrisburg for all 4 years of my college experience, and I was a student of Dr. Merck's and was ready to take the plunge. So this spring, I was able to serve as a student teacher in Downey in a 3rd grade classroom. And throughout this experience, I just learned so much. But I think what I'm here to share with you today is more about what the students taught me rather than what I taught the students. And so in the interest of time, I just have 3 lessons that they taught me throughout the semester that I hope to share with you today. The first one is love first. My mentor teacher taught me that our role is to love the students, meeting them where they are. A student will only learn from a teacher who cares about them, and this means taking the time to get to know them. Learning only occurs in the context of a loving, trusting relationship. The second one is persevere always. Many of my students had more responsibility at home than most adults. Regardless of what was happening at home, how they got to school, or how hungry their bellies were, they never gave up. They faced challenges head-on without looking back, and they never gave up. It's always better together is the third lesson. The students of my classroom supported one another through success, failure, joy, and heartache. They were quick to celebrate the success of others, and even quicker to provide support in difficulty. Just as the students support one another, this school recognizes the need for the community to partner with the school, so never do it alone. Working at Downey taught me that in order to teach a group of students, I must learn from them. Because of my experience, I decided to continue my education, and these students have inspired me. I want to continue my training as a reading specialist so that I can serve these students to the best of my ability. I cannot wait for the day when I have the privilege to be a full-time teacher. But until then, with every paper I write and book that I read and project that I do, the students of Downey are in my heart, motivating me every day.
Thanks, Molly. I'd like to ask Dr. Jean Corey if she would introduce her student and talk a little bit about the Hoveter course coming out of the NEH grant that we received.
I'm Jean Corey. This is Margarita Gonzalez. And actually, Margarita's little boy was one of the actors for that Habits. The really cute little guy towards the end here. I direct the Center for Public Humanities, and I'm just wondering, how many of you are in humanities departments here? A few. The humanities has a hard time figuring out how to be public. One of our mission for the Center for Public Humanities is to connect our disciplinary knowledge and perspectives and creative capacities to the real lives of everyday people and to the real humanitarian challenges such as enslavement. But we often have a hard time figuring out how to do that. through this Together for Tomorrow project, I kind of horned my way in with Chad and Dawn, and they're so gracious, they let me come. And they said, come on to the Together for Tomorrow meeting. And one of our first meetings, we were sitting around the table talking, and Dr. Knight Burney suggested we have this thing called the Hoverter course. And the Hoverter course is fully endowed, and it's free for anybody. And we have textbooks are free, we provide childcare. But historically, we've had a hard time populating the course. We were housed in a lonely downtown building, a business building that was surrounded by other businesses and was totally dead at night. And we didn't have a way to recruit our students. So Dr. Knight Burney talked about the possibility of us having the course at Downey School. And as she was talking, she reminisced about her own child and going to classes with her mother, and how that experience planted the seeds of her own vocation and educational leadership. And that was enough to cinch the deal for us. So this year, we offered the class in Downey School for the first time. And for the first time ever, we had to turn people away. We were fully enrolled. And one of our students, Margarita Gonzalez, is here today. We dragged her along at 5:30 in the morning and she's going to be a little late for class tonight to boot. But we wanted her to tell you about her experience with the Hoverter class.
Like she said, I'm a Downey School parent. The first time I ever heard about the Together for Tomorrow program was through my 7-year-old son. And all he knew is that out of all the schools in the world, Obama had chosen his, and this was the reason they were having a block party.
That's right.
So,
you can see a strong sense of self.
Although I was going through a rough period in my life at that point, he was so excited that I decided to attend. I'm glad I did. Upon arriving, I immediately noticed that this was not like any other event I had attended at this school. There were more parents available, and there were numerous community resources with information readily available. At the Black Party that day, one of the things that I learned about was the Hoverter program, and they had these pamphlets that said, "Are you ready for a challenge?" And I thought to myself, as many as I have, no, not really. But after much consideration, I decided to apply. I know education is the key to success, and I dream of being successful. That's why in '96, I received my GED. And in 2000, I began taking classes. Thank you. In 2000, I began taking classes here and there at the local area community college. A lot has happened since then, and I've encountered many obstacles. But through homelessness, hospitalizations due to medical reasons, and unexpected pregnancies, I continued to go to school. I never gave hope of my dream to receive my associate's degree, and I'm 5 classes away from seeing this dream realized. I'd be the first of my 6 siblings to accomplish this feat. I see this program as a way to kickstart me back on my path to higher education. You see, in my experience, lack of education is a generational problem. You see, not only am I the daughter of high school dropouts, but unfortunately now I've become the mother of a high school dropout. As I await the arrival of my first granddaughter in October, I recognize that although I was born in poverty, I was not raised in ignorance. I realized that it is not enough to simply stress the importance of education, but to lead by example. So I'd like to thank everyone today for providing this opportunity for not only myself, but others like myself that yearn to succeed, and not only to succeed, but one day be able to return the favor and help others. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to say that along with Downey parents, we also have the administrative assistant, the president of the PTO, a couple pastors from the area that are enrolled in the class at the same time. And each week, as we talk about such things as persuasive argument, I think we're doing a good job, don't you? The historical documents that our country was founded on, the possibility of narrative for ethical and critical thinking, these big ideas take on a whole new life when you have people like Margarita at the table that are breathing life into them. And so each week as we gather together, different ethnicities, different races, different religions, we have Muslims and Christians coming together to talk about these big ideas. We really are learning what it means to go far together.
The stories are what help us all to understand when our work is working. So thank you for sharing your stories, sharing your heart. And I hope each and every one of you has a story. Everybody in this audience has a story that you're willing to share. When you make this work personal, you're able to motivate other people, inspire other people to join. And so thank you so, so very much. I'm sorry Michael Robbins isn't here to hear about the Together for Tomorrow piece, because that's just awesome. And so now we're going to hear from Acacia Salati, who is the acting director of the Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships at the Department of Health and Human Services. And she comes to us with years of experience on Capitol Hill, as well known as at the department. But most especially, she comes to us with a heart for this very, very important work around healthcare. And so won't you welcome her to the platform now as she comes to share with us from the bottom of her heart to help us see how we can be even further engaged in understanding and promoting affordable health care for all. Welcome, Acacia Salati.
Good morning. As Brenda says, my name is Acacia Bamberg Salati, and I serve as the acting director for the Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. And I'm so glad that she told the segue about stories, because I'm from South Carolina. And if there's nothing people from South Carolina do better, and that is to tell a story. So if you will just beg an indulgence for just one teeny tiny second, I'd like to start my presentation with a story. And my apologies for my colleagues who I'm sure have heard this story too many times to count. But I'd like to tell the story about my former boss, Congressman Jim E. Clyburn, who was raised in South Carolina and who was a part of the civil rights movement. And Congressman Clyburn loves to tell the story about the last time he went to jail. He'd been hanging out with a lot of young people who felt that they had not experienced the full breadth of the movement because they had not gone to jail. Mr. Clyburn did not feel like he needed to repeat that particular experience since he had already gone to jail. But he was hanging out with all of these young people, and they decided that they were going to do a peaceable march to the steps of the South Carolina State Capitol. Congressman Clyburn had organized this march. He had talked with the local law enforcement. They had decided on a specific line where the protesters were going to stop, and then after that, they were going to disperse peacefully. But then here's what happened. People started singing those movement songs. People started singing those Negro spirituals. They got all caught up. And when they got to the point where they were supposed to stop, they told Mr. Clyburn in no uncertain terms would they be stopping, and they would be marching on, which then, of course, got them all promptly arrested and thrown into jail. Now, it didn't take long for the euphoria of being in jail to start to dissipate. And the same young people who were in such a hurry to experience the full breadth of the movement by being in jail, were now asking questions about when were they going to get out of jail. And so that one of them came up to Congressman Clyburn and said, well, you know, when is this going to happen? Mr. Clyburn said very patiently, do not worry. Reverend I.D. Quincy Newman is outside getting bail for everyone. He will do this forthwith. We will be out shortly. About 30 minutes later, the same young man came back to Mr. Clyburn and said, how does Reverend I.D. Quincy Newman look? Mr. Clyburn replied, well, he's short, stocky, has a goatee, glasses. And the young man said, Clyburn, Reverend I.D. Quincy Newman is in the cell right next to us. Mr. Clyburn tells this story to remind us that we all have a role to play. As he would say, it was his job to get arrested. It was Reverend I.D. Quincy Newman's job not to get arrested. So they didn't have to spend 3 days in jail in South Carolina. And so when I think about the roles that we're all playing, particularly here in this auditorium, I think the role is about the need to serve, no matter how you decide to do that. The President's Interfaith and Community Service Campus Challenge is about figuring out the ways that extraordinary people can do extraordinary things. And you may not think you're extraordinary, but anybody who decides to take time out of their busy schedule, whether they're 84 or 4 years old, to figure out a way to make the lives of people in their community different, that's something special. And so I just want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing on our end at the Department of Health and Human Services. Right now, we are in a transformational time. Our country is about to take sickness care and actually turn it into health care, all right? I've heard the stories about people who don't have health coverage. I've heard the stories about people who are scared to go to the doctor because they don't have the copay. I've heard the stories about people whose children are coughing, but because, they're working 2 jobs, they can't send their children to the pediatrician. And so the Affordable Care Act is changing all of that. And I just want to tell you one story about a young man named Malik. Malik works in the restaurant industry. So he's on his feet all day long. If any of you, I used to be a waiter. I don't know how many of you all used to do that. Okay, so you can imagine if your feet are hurting, if you have an accident, if you break your leg, this means loss of income. But if you don't have health care insurance, what would be a $20 copay for me because I've got health insurance means that this 20-year-old is going to spend the next probably 10 years of his life paying off a debt because he broke his leg. And it's stories like that about Malik, which is why we do what we do, which is why the health care law got passed, which is why on October 1st, we're going to start enrollment. So from October 1st until the end of March 2014, every state in this country is going to have a health insurance marketplace with the ability for people to be able to buy the services that they need. Now, there are some states that are also going to be expanding Medicaid. And if you're one of those states where your health insurance marketplace also includes Medicaid, that means that if you're making $15,000 or less, you are now eligible for Medicaid, period. $15,000 or less. If you are a family of 4 and you're in a state that's expanding Medicaid and you make $32,000 or less, that means that you're now eligible for Medicaid. Now, there are materials outside that gives you a lot of information about that, but I would just like to remind you, healthcare.gov on October 1st is going to be a portal where you can enroll. For people who live in rural communities like South Carolina and other places like that where they don't have access sometimes to the internet, there's a toll-free number. It's 1-800 1-800-318-2596. Once again, that's 1-800-318-2596. It's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, English and Spanish, and another 150 languages to help people get care that they need. And I just want to end on a personal story, talking about all of this. I'm the granddaughter of sharecroppers. My paternal grandmother had 10 children. She sharecropped corn, cotton. She didn't have health coverage. And we're talking about the impossible being possible. Could she ever imagine that the oldest child of her oldest child is now sitting here with extraordinary people like you, helping to ensure that the least of these have a seat at the table, particularly when it comes to having health care? King talks about the beloved community. What that means is having a comprehensive, holistic life of health and wellness, and not having to worry that because of something that may accidentally happen, that you may end up in bankruptcy, or that you can't take care of your loved ones the way that they need to be taken care of. And so on behalf of my boss, Secretary Sebelius, and on behalf of all of our bosses, President Barack Obama, I just want to say thank you for all that you do. As many people have said this before, we see you. We see all that you do. We thank you for it. We cannot do this work without you. God bless.
Whew. We work with some incredible people from each of the agencies that have Centers for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, and many of them have been with us the past 2 days leading the breakout sessions or here in plenary. And so we thank all of them for the ways that they participate. We thank you, Acacia, for being present today to share. We thank you again, Mara. We thank you for allowing us to press you into the human trafficking conversation, Trina, and just from Syracuse, and know that the work that we're doing really does matter. I had the privilege earlier this week to be in a conference, and I just get to tell Mara this publicly since I haven't told her privately, of about 400 African American women clergy. There was a meeting in Atlanta, Georgia, and at the end of that session, the declaration was that all of these women would organize to work together to help prevent trafficking in America. And many of those women had never been a part of a conversation to understand what trafficking looks like. But one of the presenters told her story of how she had been brought to be a domestic worker, and then the people who brought her would not give her the money or get her a ticket so that she could go back home. And she didn't know how to get out of that. And the story of how the community surrounded her and helped her to heal after she realized that she actually was a victim of modern day slavery. You would not have looked at her and thought that she was, but her story lets you know that she was being exploited. And the story had hit the newspapers. It was in the Atlanta Constitution, and the person who brought her was a judge. He had just been arrested as a result of that. So we don't know what it looks like unless we hear the stories and are able to be ambassadors. So this has been an awesome, awesome, awesome time of sharing. Hope that there's something that you take away that inspires you in the work.